Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to have a legislator on this program, Representative Mike Tobash. We're going to ask him about, can there be a deal on the budget, and maybe a little bit about pensions. But first, an important education update. All of that follows these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, there's probably no more important issue to the voters of this state than education. They want more education spending. How it gets spent is another matter. Fair funding formula. We've got two folks in here today to chat about this. We have Ashley DeMauro. Did I say that right?
DeMauro.
DeMauro. I should be able to get that right after all. She's the State Director of StudentsFirst PA, and Patti, he's the President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Business Council. And you know, we're going to have somebody on from the Pennsylvania State Education Association. We're going to get a variety of views on these subjects. David, let me just start with you. Education spending, it's the big issue. Where does this go in the legislature? Is there any appetite for this?
Well, I don't think there's anyone who says we don't need to spend appropriately on education.
Right.
You know, whether we have Republican governors or Democratic governors, Republican-controlled lawmakers and legislatures and Democratic legislatures, we still spend more each year on education. There are a couple of related questions. One is, how much total do you spend?
Right.
Two is, how do you distribute it to the 500 school districts so that it is spent appropriately to student needs, to school district needs,
right.
Blend it with local money raised from the property tax. Of course, this year we're bringing in the question of property tax reform to all that. But the third component to me of the spending issue is, what do you get for the money? Are you getting students who are proficient in math, in language arts, and they're ready to go on for career and college
learning?
Right.
That's the point.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about it, we've not had a fair funding formula. I mean, we've not had a formula in this state for several years, and there's a commission, is that right, that's out there? And we expect a report, but is there any update on that? Either of you could go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, there's a legislatively created commission, the Basic Education Funding Study Commission, that's been tasked with taking testimony around the state, hearing all the different viewpoints, especially those from our school districts. Statutorily, I think the report is due in June, though I think we can probably expect something a little sooner than that, since June will be a heavy month of debating the budget. So.
Yeah, June and July and August and September, right? All right. Well, let's turn then specifically to something that's called LIFO legislation. Do I got that right? LIFO legislation. This is probably above my pay grade on getting all the complexity of this, but it involves student reform groups like yours, the group that you had. Well, first of all, tell me about your group. How did you get or did you go ahead? We'll start with you.
So I'm the state director of an ed reform group called StudentsFirst in Pennsylvania. We entered the state in about 2012. We are a reform group, so we are focused on being the voice for children. And we're really guided by two main principles. One is performance-based systems of education, as Dave mentioned, looking at the outputs when we're talking about education. And two is making sure that there are high-quality options available to all students, whether that's public, traditional public, public charters, and choice through our EITC and OSTC programs.
Mm-hmm. Now, run through some of the elements in this legislation.
Well, there are a lot of parts to accountability, but this particular piece of legislation, Senate Bill 5 and House Bill 805, offered by Senator Aument and Representative Bloom in the House, is legislation that just simply says to a school district, if you have to make cuts in your professional staff, if you have to reduce the number of teachers you have, we're going to do away with the rule that says the last person who was hired is the first one who was fired. That's the traditional seniority union-based method, and it was designed to protect teachers from being dismissed because they had a high salary. It's appropriate to not want to dismiss teachers because they have a high salary, but we also don't want to get rid of our best teachers. So instead, what this legislation says is, we're going to have a new teacher evaluation program. Let's base our decisions on the evaluations. And if you have to make layoffs and have to make those tough choices, start with the teachers who are your lowest performing teachers who were rated at the lowest level and work your way up. The last thing you'd want to do is get rid of your best teachers, regardless of their number of years in the system.
Yeah, as someone, as a college professor for many years who went through those evaluations, I mean, in my case, it was, professors who came in and watched me teach, and student evaluations. There's always a concern that the evaluation instrument itself, has, you get problems with that, you get personalities in that. We're going to continue. This is an important discussion to have. We'll be back in a moment and we'll see where all of this goes.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to the program. We're talking about education spending, and a reform proposal out of a group known as Students First in Pennsylvania. All right, let's talk a little bit, Ashley, about the evaluation process. Flesh that out a little more. As I said, I mean, as someone who's had been evaluated and who's done evaluations as a teacher, I was always, a little nervous about it and unsure. Explain what the facets are, what's the elements in it.
Sure. So as we're proposing to end seniority-based layoffs, what we want to base it on is performance instead. And so the bills introduced, the Protecting Excellent Teachers Act, actually base it on our educator evaluation system in Pennsylvania. This is a new system. It was passed by our state legislature in 2012. Schools piloted it for several years before passage, and now they're in full implementation of this new system. And the system really does aim to take some of the subjectivity out of the previous system. Yeah. We had 100% based solely on classroom observations under the old system, and now that only accounts for half of it. The other half of it is now based on what we like to say is multiple measures of student achievement. So we are looking at student achievement, we're looking at student growth, and we're looking at a couple other academic indicators, including building level measures and individual teacher level measures to come up with a really holistic evaluation that really measures a teacher's impact on students.
Yeah. Dave, one of the things that, I think you and I have talked about in your previous appearances here has to do with, core standards.
Sure, Keystone exams.
Yeah, that I know.
Right.
I mean,
this is all integrated.
There's another uneasiness, I think, about teaching to tests, and you hear these complaints. And I mean, obviously, we all want to make sure the students are learning. But this is not an easy thing to get a handle on.
It's not, but it's important to think about how the public policy is integrated here. Assuming you're testing the core information that's really necessary for moving on in your education and in your life, then I do want you to teach to the test, in fact. I'm hoping that any school teacher, any high school teacher, any college professor is walking in and teaching the most important part of that subject matter and then testing on what they just taught.
But
so I think that's fine.
There's a follow-up question here. I'll go to you, Ash.
Sure.
Do you think the tests actually demonstrate the core learning, or
well, it's the multiple measures. It's one of the things. I mean, obviously teachers are going to evaluate students on other measures. We're going to evaluate teachers on other things besides test scores, and we're going to evaluate the school buildings and the school systems on more than just test scores.
Right.
Sure.
But they're integrated to all those things. So school performance profiles, which allow taxpayers and parents to go out and see how their particular building that their young person is in is doing. The teacher evaluations, the student evaluations are all integrated through the system.
Okay, before I let you go, where does all this go?
Sure. I mean, I think,
I could ask Representative Tobash that question, who's coming on. Where does it all go?
Yeah, so as we approach June and approach, hopefully, a conclusion to the state budget, we're certainly going to be talking about spending more money on education. I think we need to talk, number one, about how we're spending that, but then we also need to make sure, as Dave mentioned earlier in the program, that we have to get the benefits for what we're spending. And that all starts with an effective teacher in front of the classroom, which is why we need to protect the best ones in the unfortunate case of layoffs. So hopefully this can all be done. It will all work together to improve our system of education in Pennsylvania.
All right, thanks for coming on. All right, are we going to get a budget on time? Is it going to include pensions as part of some deal to get the budget and education spending? We got a House member here, and we know he's going to help us out. We'll be back in a minute.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Well, welcome back to the program. Joining me is State House Representative Michael Tobash. He represents Schuylkill and the northern part of Dauphin County. Now, I didn't put too much pressure on you to resolve all of these big issues, did I?
We have a lot of big issues, Terry. There's no question about it.
Well, I want to talk about pensions when we get to the next segment of the program, and I know you have a bill and you want to talk about, but, I mean, trying to figure out, now you've got to vote on this. We've got this huge Governor Wolf budget, right, that calls for increased spending. He wants to do property tax relief, raise 2 state taxes to do it. He wants to do education spending and a shale tax to help pay for that. How is this going to end up?
Well, when you talk, I mean, I think the term that you used first was huge. I mean, it's a huge budget. I mean, there's an increase in spending in this budget. And I think, you know, the way it's characterized right now, I think last year we're about at $29.1 billion, and I think this is at about 29.1, and it's now 29.8. But there's some line items that have been removed from the budget, and we will talk about that pension expense. About $2 billion of pension cost has been moved to a restricted account. So it's absent in the budget, but we still owe it, and believe me, it's something that we need to focus on. So to me, when I look at that budget right out of the box, that's a problem. We have been fortunate enough to settle some on-time budgets, and there will be a budget on the governor's desk on June 30th. I'm certain of it.
Are you serious?
I'm certain that we will present a budget.
You'll pass the
we
budget,
will present a budget to the governor.
Or not.
Yeah, by that date.
I haven't thought about that, but I keep saying nobody's betting that it'll get done by June 30, but now you're saying you think you're going to pass one, he's not going to like it. I mean, let's be candid. He's probably not going to like what you do, and then you'll have to negotiate thereafter.
Well, look, there's no question about it that if you're talking about spending probably in real dollars, spending $3 billion more, 10%, maybe as much as 15% more in this given year, that's going to be a problem for a lot of taxpayers in the Commonwealth. So we are working right now vigorously to make sure we've got a document, something that I think is reasonable for Pennsylvanians moving forward, and we're going to get that done before June 30th.
All right. So if you had a guess, and I'm here to put you on the spot, as you know, and you get that all the time. Nothing new for you. Property tax reform, income sales tax, probably not part of it at this point. Would you say?
Look, I mean, there's been conversations, and you know that there's a bill out there that a lot of people are touting. And when I go into the public, I mean, the number one issue that I hear from a lot of people are property taxes. Yeah, we hear it all the time. So not that we don't need to work on that, but if you take a look at the numbers and, again, really boil them down, it's all well and good to say that we're going to save everybody tax dollars, property tax dollars, but we're going to spend a lot more money. But that if it sounds too good to be true, it might be too good to be true.
Is it too complex to do quickly?
Well,
you got a lot of moving parts with an income tax hike, a sales tax hike, which includes 45, you're removing 45 exemptions, and then the debate over who are the winners and losers on it. Is that too complex to do in 6-8 weeks?
So complex, so monumental. Believe me, I believe wholeheartedly in taking the pressure off property taxpayers. Yeah. But when you take a look at the way that those funds were distributed in individual school districts and how much the sales and income tax would go up compared to property tax relief, I think people will realize it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it should be a thoughtful, concerted effort like is being done with a couple of a House and a Senate bill.
All right, one more question, and then we'll go to a break, and we'll get to your pension plan. All right, education spending. If, and just say hypothetically if, you get pension reform, we'll talk about the details of what you want to do. You think there's support in the legislature to give the governor a shale tax to increase education spending? There's a bill in, Republican bill, 3.2% shale tax, Democratic bill 8, that begs the compromise of 4 or 5. You get where I'm heading with that.
I do.
Do you think that's a likely deal?
Look, at the end of the day, because we've got this tremendous increase in our pension costs that are being felt by every sector of government, every taxpayer, every property taxpayer is feeling this, and they're going to continue feeling it more and more until the year 2018-19. I will certainly not come here and admit that we don't need a multi-step approach that might include revenue. And the question becomes, where do we find that revenue?
Where do you get it, yeah.
So the conversation about shale tax is on the table. That we talk about cigarette taxes, obviously, now with the governor's proposal. People are looking at expanding the sales tax base, they're taking a look at income tax.
So what you're saying is that maybe there's a way to massage some of these other things, and we got to run to a break and meld them into education
we did
spending.
not get in this huge pension crisis overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight, and we need a multi-step approach. And we need to talk about it.
All right, I'm talking about. We're going to talk about pensions, and it's a big issue. There are a variety of ways and different approaches. Well, I'm going to talk with Representative Tobash about that after the break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Joining me is State House member Mike Tobash. He represents a district in northern Dauphin County and Schuylkill County. It's 125th District. These numbers, there's 203 of them in the House. We get bogged down in the numbers. All right, there isn't any doubt, and we've done a lot of pension shows on this, that it's a big issue. Some say $54 billion. You get different numbers in long-term debt. It's over, $2 billion annually out of the state budget. Am I right so far?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's a lot of money.
And there are all these different views. The governor has a plan, or some ideas he's put out. You all have a plan. Let's talk about is it safe to say House Republicans won? Or, your name is prominently on a bill.
So, there's 120 House Republicans. So,
right.
When we talk about pension reform, and I'll just go back to a couple points right here. Number one, Pennsylvania needs public pension reform. Yeah. We talk about some of these numbers, and the fact that you've done a lot of shows on this is important. I was with somebody talking to a young fellow the other night, and after just talking about the critical nature of the problem, He said, I'm sorry, but I didn't know that we were in this kind of a mess. Yeah. And the fact that you continue to talk about it and we continue to talk about it is really important for us to get something accomplished, because it is getting worse and worse. I can tell you that I like talking about it because every Pennsylvanian wants pension reform.
Which differ as to how you reform it.
That's exactly right. When you get down and dissect the problem and see what the particular issue is for that person, then you can figure out what they want and what pension reform means to them. So it means a lot of different things. Number one, if you're a school district, this increase in the employer contribution is crushing our school districts. I did a taping the other day with a member who's a friend of mine. And I misspoke, and I said it's the elephant on the roof instead of the elephant in the room. But I got to tell you, I think it is the elephant on the roof. It's crushing every school district. It's on every school district in the Commonwealth. And I've got some statistics here, but you're right that in 2014-15, the employer contribution from the general fund is $2.6 billion.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, in 2010-11, it was $700 million. And by the year 2018-19, it's going to be $4.5 billion. So we're going up another $2 billion.
So I think we all agree. I mean, everybody agrees there needs to be something done. Governor Wolf wants to do bonds that, there's a debate about, to be honest about, the debate about your plans as well. And he wants to say these Wall Street managers, we're giving them $500 million a year, let's cut that out. Let me ask you this question. Is there any, and then we'll get to what you propose, is there any support in your caucus, do you think, probably that's an unfair question, for either of those ideas?
So people take a look. Let's talk about the bonding issue. There's a couple things when we went at this problem in the last session. There's a number of things that we're trying to accomplish. And I think number one, we're thoughtful about trying to reduce costs and develop some savings. We have a $50+ billion debt here, liability in the Commonwealth. So it only makes sense if this was in your household, the first thing you do is go back and take a look at trying to reduce cost. Number two, shifting the risk. If there's one thing that's apparent in this problem, Terry, it is this, that the mismanagement of our pension systems by the legislature is a major component that got us in the situation that we're in right now.
Not funding the pension system for 4 years.
That's exactly right. Finding ways to not pay the debt.
You all agree with that. Even Democrats and Republicans, I think, agree that there should have been.
There's no question. Given the opportunity, and you go back to 2000, Act 9, when benefits were increased retroactively, and then Act 38 the next year, 40 the next year, during those periods of time, there were votes made that allowed the legislature and the local school districts not to put the funds into those pension programs that they required.
What do you want to do? You want a 401k style plan?
Well, I think that it's very important for us to shift away from the scenario that got us in this problem to begin with. I think taxpayers really expect us to go to a program that is similar to the private sector. And everyone I talk to, without exception, like you said, Democrats and Republicans talk about the fact that one of the major problems is our inability to manage it, not putting the payments in. And I have to tell you, many new people want a program that gives them payment at the time of service.
All right, before I let you go, are you in the camp that says we should do something with current employees or only with new employees? That's been a huge issue.
It is a huge issue, and I can tell you this: I think that we need to work independently with different bills. Okay, I don't think that we should have a bill that introduces changes to current member benefits with a plan that introduces a new plan for future members into the system. I think number one, you're going to end up in court if you try and do that, and then really not have pension reform.
Reform. All right. Look, I want to thank you for coming in. We're going to continue our discussions on this whole issue of pensions because it's directly related to whether a budget gets done. At least that's what some lawmakers have said. All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.